The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their territory, the traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. Before I get into the consent agenda, I just want to make a brief announcement. If I could today, I just want to acknowledge that this past weekend was a very busy weekend in the City of Parksville. We kicked off the Beach Fest sand sculpting competition. Started on Friday and so forth, and it went all weekend long. Concluded with the awards ceremony last night, which was all done and said. The sculptors, I was down there, of course, and they're absolutely amazing. As well as that, we had the largest event we've had at our City of Parksville Community Park at the new Outdoor Performing Arts Theater. We had Trooper playing. We welcomed 3,100 people into the park, an all-time record as well. And it was organized by mainly the Beach Fest organization, to which I express my extreme gratitude, but with a lot of collaboration from a lot of groups. The RDN jumped in at the very last minute and so forth and provided a transit to outlying districts to come in for the Trooper concert. We had 650 people take advantage of that transit system, and my hat's off to the City of Parksville staff that jumped in literally on Friday and had proper signage made and so forth, so that the people knew where the queuing up spots were going to be for the bus. It was a huge event put on by many, many people, which I'm so grateful for. It truly put Parksville on the map. The theater performed very well. Trooper did pretty good, but as well, and the sound system was incredible. There was no incidents. We had liquor license for the entire premises, and I was there with my family, and it was a great family event. Everyone had a lot of time, and there was no incidents at all that we had any police involvement in at all. So all around, just a great event, and my appreciation to everybody that attended to support this very worthy event, and also to everybody that helped organize it, because it was a lot of work. So just had to say kudos to everybody who collaborated on that. Thank you so much. Council, today for the council consent agenda, we have Adam Fraz is called in. Councillor Adam Fraz will be 20 minutes late, but he is on his way as well. So we'll be at full strength today. Thank you. Consent agenda, could I have the minutes of the council meeting held July 3rd, 2024 and approval of the council meeting agenda? Moved, please. Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Are there any errors or omissions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, that carries. Council, we have 3 delegations today. We'll start off with A. Tarnowski regarding a business license application for the Oceanside Rentals. Presentation by A. Tarnowski regarding a business license application for Oceanside Rentals here in the City of Parksville. Mr. Tarnowski or Ms. Tarnowski, are you here? Okay. This is going to be a quick presentation. Maybe I've got the spelling or the pronunciation wrong. Tarnowski, A. Tarnowski, Tarnowski, in the house. Seeing none, CAO Kaler, have we received any correspondence from Mr. Tarnowski advising that they would not be able to attend?
If I may, through the mayor, we have not received anything, but perhaps if they're late, council could decide to let them speak later and change the order. So allowing the delegation under B to perhaps go first, and then if that individual does arrive at council's pleasure, they could allow them to speak later. And if they don't arrive, then that's on there is an item in the agenda later, but yes, this is their opportunity to speak to council.
Sure. Well, what I think we'll do then, council, we'll take and we'll adjust the agenda slightly to number 3 under reports. The issue regarding the delegation is there. I'll suggest that we move that to the end of the report section, giving the person opportunity to maybe show up just in time. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's go to the next delegation. The next delegation is from Primex Investments Limited regarding the development permit application at 1180 Resort Drive. Presentation by G. Mitchell and E. Wren of Primex Investments Limited. Are you here? Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's good to see. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, welcome. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, sir.
Oh,
So
there we go.
you are
My name is Greg Mitchell.
Greg Mitchell. Okay, thanks.
I am the Senior Development Manager and Senior Urban Planner with Primex Investments. I'm joined today by my colleague Echo, who's behind me, our project team as well. And obviously you're here today to talk about our development project at 1180 Resort Drive, just sort of not far from where we sit right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project, give you a 30-second overview on Primex, introduce the project team so that you know who to direct some questions to should they come up. The project overview as to how we've come to what we've got, some of the features, the sustainability features, the landscape features that we've included in our project. And lastly, I certainly am open to answering any questions that may come up through the presentation and or otherwise. So thank you very much. So Primex Investments, we are Vancouver based, but we are a family-owned real estate company based in Vancouver. We specialize in the development of rental housing. That's our bread and butter. So we currently operate about 2,300 rental units across BC. About a third of that is on Vancouver Island, almost 500 units in Nanaimo. We are slowly moving up the island, and this will be our furthest project north to date, but we are sort of migrating up the island, and Parksville seems like a next step from Nanaimo and further up. Incidentally, I grew up in Campbell River and spent time just down here as a kid with my grandparents much along the way. So it was kind of exciting to do a project in Parksville again. We've got 2,000 units in our development pipeline, and this is a fairly significant chunk of that. So the project team is Raymond DeBeeld Architects. Raymond's here today. McDonald Gray Consultants, who are both planning consultants and landscape architects. They're here as well. And Michelle from Timberline for any engineering questions. The site is currently a 6-acre gravel site. You're probably familiar with it down by Resort Drive, Tinamera. It's not the whole sort of piece of land. It's divided by a hydro line, but the 6 acres that we're talking about here. And we've divided it roughly in half. So we're really only developing, call it the left half or the northwestern half at this stage. There will be a future phase that we haven't quite dialed in on the rest of the site. The idea is to develop a 100% market rental project, 233 units across 3 buildings. Very few studios. In fact, I think we only have 3 junior 1-bedrooms that are really through architecture. And from our application to now, one thing we were able to do when we started the site, it was condo. We've kind of evolved that planning to now rental. We're able to look at it and actually bring 3-bedroom rentals to the market. So there are 14 3-bedroom rentals planned as part of this project. Oops, skip ahead there. That's okay. So the idea here somehow went to the very beginning. So I apologize. Let's all the fancy stuff becomes moot here. Somehow hit the end button. That was not very good. My apologies. There we go. So it's effectively a 3-building site surrounded by a mews, internal vehicle courtyard, 2 separate Park 8 entries to access the underground parking. 265 of 275 parking spaces are underground, and really the surface stalls are for visitor, drop-off areas, and convenience. And really, some of the architectural features I want to talk about that are also sustainability features are a real focus on at least step code 3. We say at least because as we do our energy modeling, sometimes we're finding you're going above and beyond without really trying. Heating and cooling HVAC systems are planned. The technology is not yet defined, but we know we're going to have that. Underground parking is mentioned with 100% charging. A particular emphasis on e-scooters and e-bike storage and charging. Something we've done in Victoria is actually cargo bike parking because it requires a bigger space. So we're probably going to look at incorporating that as well. And the low flow fixtures. We know water is a challenge in Parksville. We want to make sure that we're not being detrimental to that effort. So one of the things from the advisory design panel that we've really done is emphasis on the identification of the three buildings. So in the vertical where the elevator stacks are, we've added color, we've added natural materials, a lot of stonework to really differentiate. So we've got green on one building, blue on another, really to kind of make them stand out. All of the ground floor units will have their own outdoor patios and small little garden areas and access out into the public realm. The amenities we're planning here, and again, we are rental builders. We're also rental operators. And so we aim to really create a great community. So pool and hot tub are something we're looking at here. A fully equipped gym, party amenity rooms, co-working space is something we've done some research and suggest would be really useful here for those who may want to live here but work remote and don't necessarily want to work in their homes. I'm a big fan of Rath Trevor Beach. My dog was there a couple of weeks ago and got very dirty. So a dog run and a dog wash is something we are incorporating into the plan as well. At ground level, the idea is very pedestrian friendly, very easy to get around, low barrier. And you can kind of see that vertical expression I mentioned there briefly. Again, the colors and materials will all stand out. The landscaping is all xeriscaping, drought resistant, very low maintenance from a water necessity point of view. And we are excited to make this place look great. So kind of the overall site plan, kind of emphasize that amenity building, the hot tub, the swimming pool sort of tucked away. You've got a community garden that was quite a bit smaller when we first started. Through our own operations team and what we've heard from other rental buildings, plus what we've heard from the advisory design panel, we've doubled the size of this amenity in our application. We've put a small children's play area, a very natural play area off in this corner that will be a natural play area for luck. I think logs stacked upon each other and things that kids can climb over and run and have fun. The dog run, dog wash sort over here. And one thing that the city has emphasized is the multi-use pathway as a really great piece of transportation infrastructure as you move into town. So the multi-use pathway here will be really working with the city, make sure it's designed well. A new bus stop is also planned as part of this that sort of comes right out from our project. At the end of the day, there's 4 minor variances that we've requested. A little bit of setback reduction for underground parking, setback reduction to allow decks to extrude a little bit out beyond normal, and a small height increase of 0.85 meters, just under a meter. That allows us to tuck more insulation between each level. And as instead of 3 refuse areas and 3 buildings, sort of a more centralized garbage area. And at the end of the day, we are excited to be working here, obviously in Parksville. My credit to the planning team and the engineering team for working with us. They've been great. And we certainly are excited to start construction here, hopefully next year. We are under aiming, if we're going to do it, we're going to go do it right. And this is a great site and we're excited to be working here in Parksville. So I'm happy to answer any questions and I can direct questions to the team here if there's anything I can't answer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your very concise presentation. Right on time. Thanks, Greg, for that. Just a quick comment anyways. Thank you for your confidence in deciding to develop here in Parksville. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And we certainly need more rental units. 230 units is big on our wish list and so forth. This certainly help us to achieve our goals that we're trying to. These would appear to be market rental, to be clear anyways, somewhat I would say upgraded market rental, because I would think that with not many rental units come with a swimming pool and a hot tub. It's great and I like that. It's very will be well received, I'm sure, by your tenants. And I'm also appreciative for the 3-bedroom units that you're incorporating as well. And the children's play area, you are right beside one of the most famous beaches in the world. And so that is the type of market that you're going to attract. So I appreciate that. I'm going to turn over to council for any questions. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I don't have any sort of major questions. I'm very pleased to see that you've got some 3 bedrooms. I know there's families that want to house together. I've met them in our constituents, so that'll be appropriate. We've been wanting that land to be done for years and watching it. So finally, we'll have something that's presentable, beautiful. So thank you very much. Everything's, from my perspective, excellent. I don't have any detailed questions at this time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Gowan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Greg, for the presentation. This is sort of going backwards a little bit, but like this area is a resort area, very Parksville special area, like visitors, people who live here. It has its own character. So adding a 6-story building, which is, again, I know it was an OCP amendment and everything, other than market rentals, what amenities, like, are these pools and all those things open to public? Is any of those amenities that are being provided, are they just for the patrons and the tenants, or any outside public can utilize? So adding these 233 rentals, other than that, I want to know, like, what amenities does the general public benefit from this project?
The amenities that were described there are for the use of the residents, our future residents. But I would emphasize that we're only talking about half the site here. This is sort of the northwestern half. We are working separately on a future plan that's more of a commercial based for the other side of the site. I don't have any details on that, so I don't want to overpromise, because we're working through the process on that. And that would be sort of ideally, in a perfect world, a grocery anchored small retail center with some perhaps residential on that side as well. But again, we haven't figured all of the details out there. The amenities on site, the expansion of the multi-use pathway, I'd say is a really important amenity along that stretch. Obviously, when we can come in the future, it will extend further through the site, as well as also just, even though this is sort of a road through the site that's planned, it is not barriered. So people who maybe need to get to Resort Drive will be able to go through. There's a roundabout to slow it down, so there's no rat running, as it's called. But the plan here is that those amenities, the pool, community garden, all that are meant for our future residents.
Follow, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for that answer to that question. My other question is about the tree buffer along the Highway 19A. So within the resort areas DPA, which it falls under, are you providing that 20-meter buffer of the trees? And also, my understanding is that we discourage any ins and outs along 19A. So any entrance or exits from a development. Did you look at the possibility of just using Resort Drive as exit? And
The previous applicant had gone through a process on the site that I believe rezoned the site. And I don't know all the history of the project, but that included an entry and an exit, or right in, right out off the highway. So we've more or less kept that right in, right out in the same location, so that we're consistent with the approved plans from City of Parksville. So that's where that road entry comes in. I would say when we get to doing the commercial side, that road entry will be even more important to future commercial tenants, but again, sort of a separate issue. In terms of the tree buffer, landscaping is here, but it's not 20 meters, it's 10 meters that I believe we're providing. I may be incorrect on that, but the tree buffer there is going to be extensive and planted per the Douglas Fir requirements for the area. And if I've gotten that wrong, please throw something. Okay.
We're okay on that, Nigel? Okay, thank you. Great. Councillor Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to our delegation, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you very much for coming today. And you mentioned a few interesting things that we like to talk about around here, especially when it comes to making sure that these developments foster a sense of community within them. And so wonderful to see the amenities that you're building into this project. I'd also like to thank you for your work with the advisory design panel, and Mary as well. I did watch your presentation and work with them online, and was great to see the input there from that group that has shaped what we see here today. So thank you for taking that into consideration. I do have 3 questions. One is a bit of a general one, more about markets and helping people understand how rental markets work. We've had the Minister of Housing recently ask that we see a specific vacancy rate in our community in order to get a short-term rental exemption for Resort Drive. Fortunately, we were able to get that exemption anyway, but it does bring up the issue of vacancy rates. And also I've heard from members in the community some maybe misunderstanding about how market rentals work. So maybe from the perspective of someone who operates over 2,000 rental units, you can give a bit of a primer on how you set your pricing and what factors go into that, and how adding 233 units into our community might have an effect on vacancy rates and rental prices. I know it's a big area, but
be specific. Yeah.
be specific and answer in 30 words or less. Thank you.
The long and short of it is the market is what the market is. And that sounds really cliched. But we set our rents and we aim to be in sort of I call it Ford, not Ferrari. We want to be a really high quality Ford product. We don't want to be the Ferrari of rental markets. So we want them to be high quality. We are a private company. We do want to get quote unquote the maximum rent, but that doesn't mean that we're trying to blow the market out of the water. We aim to be on the upper end of what a rental ban might be in any jurisdiction we exist in, be it Victoria, Nanaimo, Abbotsford, Kelowna. Everybody is a little bit different. I can't help but feel adding 233 market rentals in an area that is underserved. I mean, this area of Vancouver Island is generally underserved with rental. I know Parksville's had significant new product and South Nanaimo's had some new product, but given the amount of people that are coming to British Columbia and Canada and our municipalities, it's still not enough. 233 is what we could fit, for lack of a better term. And if we could, in a reasonable format, we would probably add more. We have a second half of the site. We'll figure out what happens there. I don't think it's certainly not going to hurt the rental market. It will help in terms of providing families and individuals and opportunities to live in the communities. And I know that we've been approached in the past by the resorts in the area who may want to work with us in terms of some sort of partnership for workforce housing. We don't know if we'll do that, but those are conversations that are happening and have happened. So we're excited to bring this here. As you know, that we initially envisioned this site as a condo development, given the short-term rental opportunity, not necessarily to run it as short-term rental. We felt people who may want to move from the Lower Mainland may want to live here, short-term rental while they weren't here. I'd be lying if the provincial rules didn't change that, but concurrently federal rules changed that made building rental, which is our bread and butter anyhow, advantageous again. So it was an easy transition for us to move over to rental. And our design team did a great job converting what were 2-bedroom walk-offs into really good 3-beds. Like, these are not meant to be shoeboxes. That's why I say there's very few studios, and we were able to bring 14 3-bedroom units to this project. So 35% family units between 2s and 3s. Great. You okay? And that was one. Right?
Thank you. Do you want all 3 now or? Okay. All right, thanks. You exceeded your word count, but I'll go with it because you gave me some additional interesting information about the short-term rentals piece. You mentioned that you want to do it right, and given my background, I consider communication to be a key part of doing things right. And I think coming into Parksville, seeing 6-story building will be somewhat shocking to some people in the community. Have you considered at all what you may be doing to bring the community on side for a bit of a change for this area? Where 6 stories, I mean, I'm totally with you. I just this weekend spoke with a gentleman who is selling his home and is going to be downsizing and moving into a smaller place in our community. And this is important that people can move within our community to different types of housing depending on their stage of life. But I think bringing people on side for multi-story is sometimes a little bit sort of more controversial. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on how to do that.
If we were going through the process of relocating existing tenants, I think it would be more of a challenge. If you're relocating an older building and replacing it, and we've had to do this in other jurisdictions, I think that challenge would be more higher. Currently, it's a 6-acre gravel site that has broom and all sorts of invasive weeds that we are annually trying to extract. So while while I can see people being surprised at it, our architecture, our design, our landscaping, our planting is really gonna hopefully minimize that. Also, working with the design team, we've really tried to reduce the bulk at the upper levels. So the sixth floor is set back. Architecturally, it's meant to kind of provide articulation. I think when it's all built out, it's people are living there, people are coming and going through the area. I don't think people will notice it being out of place. I know from a market point of view, the market really doesn't support the construction of anything less than 6-story rentals anymore, just because of the cost of construction and the efficiencies you get at that little bit of extra height.
All right, thank you. And then that'll transition me into my third one, which is you touched on a little bit in terms of the other side of that property, what you have sort of dreams about doing there. Is there a plan in the meantime for what to do with that property beyond broom mitigation?
During construction, and unless something happens in the immediate future, it will become part of a laydown area, a part of allows to store materials, be efficient in terms of construction, bring materials to site and without disrupting traffic too much along the highway. Over time, we hope to, like I say, to have a grocery anchored small retail outlet. Again, not highway commercial. I do want to emphasize that. Our aim is something that's more local. It's far too early to offer any promises. These are the visions we have. But in the interim, it would likely be stripped of the surface so we can get as much of the invasive weeds off, and then used as a trailer area, lay down area, parking for trades as well, because parking is going to be challenging for some of our trades who may be coming from other areas of the island.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation. As Councillor Grenz mentioned, I was sitting on the advisory design panel when this proposal first came forward. So I appreciate seeing you come back, because I have been wondering now and again. I phone the planning department and I say, did those people go away? You may or may not know that over the years, there have been proposals for that property that then have come to naught. So I'm pleased to hear that your hope and plan is to in fact start working on this next year, assuming that it goes ahead and that it will in fact happen. At the advisory design panel, I did question the tree buffer, which was meant for the resort area, and understood that that was a variance, a reduction that was looked at. Understanding that along that side, opposite that is Ricky's. There's yeah. Anyway, all in all, I think in that particular setting, it won't be a problem. And right now, we do have a field of mostly gorse, which is really awful, and as well as some broom, and the landscape plan to have on there, and the types of trees I might add for that area will really really enhance the space. I also appreciate the use of split rail fencing along, which I think will help to mitigate a little bit of that, that density of building, and make it feel a little bit more like, oh, it's a resort area. The first question that I had, you've already answered, which was who was going to be operating it. And so I'm pleased to hear that you're both builder and operator, and that you have experience in that area, and that you were able to pivot to, given the changes with the provincial legislation and the like. So I'm hoping and counting on a quality product here. Also pleased to see some of the recommendations from the design panel included in there, such as something along Resort Drive that makes that a little bit more inviting. And all in all, it really looks like it'll be a great addition to the area. Yeah, but one question I do have is, assuming that this does go ahead, do you have a plan for which building? Like, I'm just wondering about how the timeline would go. Do you have, with the plan B, to complete one building, moving on to the next? And if you could share some of that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, and recognizing that the construction phasing is actually currently a discussion we're having with our partners who will be building it for us. At this point, we think it's going to go ABC, and that's kind of how it had been labeled. It's not intended to be a build and occupy A, then move on to B. There will be sort of concurrent construction. You'll finish framing on A, you'll start on B, you'll move on to C. There will be, and we'll work with the city staff for various occupancies, because we hope to occupy the buildings before perhaps full construction is done on, say, building C. We hope to welcome people into building A, as an example. That phasing, quite literally on Tuesday, we were having a discussion with our construction partners as to how to make that work, and it's a bit of a discussion. The aim here is, like I say, to make a great community. We do take pride in our operations as well. And like I say, we have a fairly significant Vancouver presence, including the NIMO. So it was an easy transition with a great property management team to move up. To your comment about landscaping, I got to give credit to Kara and Nigel for that landscaping plan and steering us in the right direction to make sure what we were providing is what the city both needed and worked with our requirements as well.
Mary? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Mitchell. City of Parksville does not control immigration into Canada. The federal government does. And even our premier is, talking about the amount of immigration and how much BC is shouldering of that. And long-term rentals is a huge part of that solution. Median home price in Parksville is $800,000, and for a down payment, you start at maybe $55,000. And so that during a cost of living crisis is an issue, and you don't need a $55,000 deposit for long-term rentals. And so, while people may not like the idea of tall buildings being built, that is part of what we need to do for people who cannot afford a $55,000 down payment. And Parksville is doing their part in looking at projects like this. Two questions for you. One was at the beginning of your presentation, you said family owned, and I wanted to get you to elaborate a little bit more about that, because a lot of people have this idea that, Darth Vader or some other insert supervillain here is behind a lot of projects, and you opened your presentation with family owned. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, how did the federal rules help change the direction of this project? Thanks.
Sure. Family owned, the Renison family, who I work for Andrew Renison. So when I say family, it's direct family. Their family owns the vast majority of shares within Primex. There's 30, 40, 50 shareholders in behind the scenes, but when I say family owned, it is not a REIT. It's not a pension fund. It is a Vancouver-based family with history up and down the island, as well as in the Lower Mainland and the Okanagan. So hopefully that answers that question. In terms of the second part, if you can repeat your question, because I've just drawn a blank. My apologies.
Sorry, I think
the federal role.
Yeah,
federal
from
role.
Sean Fraser.
So it was sort of 6 of one and half dozen another. So the provincial changes to short-term rental, which made condo sales less likely and less advantageous, combined with things like the GST rebate at the federal level, capital cost accounting changes at the federal level, which means that you can write off rental housing income against construction costs. And I'm not an accountant, so I don't quite know how it all works, but it was very advantageous. Those two things are happening simultaneously, kind of pushed it back towards rental. And it also comes with the fact that rental is our bread and butter. So we're more comfortable with that as a start. We started with rental here. We looked at the market at the time, thought, oh, this would be a great opportunity for condo. The market was going well then. Short-term rental rules changed, not as great. Again, not to run it as a short-term rental, but people who may want to invest and move here, like my dad, for example, was looking at, can I move to down, but I don't want to move there yet. So stuff like that. So it just didn't work out. And then we're like, well, let's go down our rental pathway, which we know, we operate, we run, we have more comfort in. And that ultimately is what led us back to rental, was the combination of both negative from the province and positive from the feds.
You good? Go ahead. Councillor Wood.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to add that this is, regardless of whether or not Parksville goes ahead with this is exactly the kind of thing that both the federal and provincial governments are begging municipalities to do. Thanks very much.
Yeah. And thank you for that as well, Greg, because we'll be most interested in Minister Fraser as well in understanding that the GST reduction elimination was a factor in creating more rental housing.
Yes.
So Minister Fraser will be happy about that. We want him to do more. So we're working on that as well. I can assure you. So that is all good news. I just had one question regarding the phasing of, you were talking about the phasing of this proposal as it is here of ABC. And that's how the construction is going to go on. The other half of the property, which I appreciate you using that as a lay down site as well as trades parking. So it'd be a minor, less of an impact on
Yes.
the neighborhood surrounding, which is of course resort driven and tourist accommodation, which has a lot of families and people on bikes and out
Yep.
and doing all sorts of things. And so that is probably a very good move. I can see right at this particular point. But, and also as well as the other half of the property, the future half, does building C have to be completed before the other half of the project does start? It could happen sooner if
Yes.
all
If
the
if
stars
things
align.
align,
Yes.
if we get certain things signed up, then the second part, I call it a phase, second phase isn't quite accurate, but the second part could advance more quickly. We're just waiting to hopefully get some of those things lined up and figured out, at which time we will probably have to go through on a process with your planning department to make sure what we're building fits both zone and development permit requirements, just to make sure it all fits. And then in all likelihood, we'll be back to this council or another council to ask for the permissions on that site at that time.
Great. Then that brings me to my next question. My screen's a little smaller than the one behind me here. The multi-use pathway you were talking about is actually on 19A highway?
Yes.
Okay, because then that leads into the phase 2 of your,
Yes.
will be a continuation of that, hopefully right through to Arbutus Road.
Yes.
Yeah, which is certainly advantageous for our tourist traffic that are on there unsafely at this time, right? So I'd be very most appreciative of that. So I'm very pleased with it. Shannon, it's going to happen. It's just those stars have to align first before it happens. And I appreciate that. But in the meantime, yeah, let's use it for some lay down for the construction material. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to get an idea. Do you have any timelines about when you'll be starting if this goes through? Like, would it take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? I have no understanding of that. Do you?
If we aim to start construction in 2025 and we're aiming to beat the pending BC building code changes because those will be very negatively impactful on rental development. So we are aiming to get ahead of that curve. That is, again, our thanks to city staff for helping us get there. Our aim is to start construction next summer.
Mhm.
Project like this, I don't have the exact timeline, but you are probably looking 30 months from start to finish in the phase. And again, that allows for a bit of concurrent construction.
Right. Sort of
during-
ABC. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Gorin, and we're going to wrap this up.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank
One more question for you. This, as you know, property sits on the aquifer. That's why it's groundwater protection
Mhm.
area. Can you speak a little bit about the stormwater management plan for the site? Within the checklist, I think you say that it will be partly zero stormwater runoff. So have you looked at perhaps rain gardens, just capturing all of the stormwater so you can seep back into the ground?
So this site is effectively a gravel pit. It's, I believe, and Michelle can correct me if I'm correct, wrong, but I believe the stormwater or the water table is 70 or 80 feet below the surface. So it's effectively a gravel pit. We're not at risk of tapping the aquifer in terms of our one level underground parking. We are using parts of that roundabout as a large detention tank, rain garden, so that it does capture the rainwater, the low flow irrigation, and obviously we are building a parkade, so we do have to kind of grade the parkade to allow drainage off to the sides. But because it is gravel, we do expect the infiltration to be relatively simple. We are planning for it. The roofs will lead to gutters, which will lead down and into the groundwater.
Thank you. Okay, I would conclude by thank you very much for your presentation. Yes.
Thank you very much.
we're
Have a
looking-
wonderful day. Cheers.
Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. Greg. Our next delegation is the Regional District of Nanaimo, speaking to a presentation by E. Forsman for the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program Coordinator for the RDN to share updates to the water conservation framework. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
You have 10 minutes for your presentation, but you already know that.
Fantastic.
Here we go.
So just to start by introducing myself for those that I haven't met in the room. My name is Erica Forsman. I coordinate the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program for the Regional District of Nanaimo. This program is a regional service, and we're really tasked with protecting the region's water resources. And this is across the regional district. So all of our partner municipalities and electoral areas are included in that. The overall very high level objectives of the program are really to learn more about water resources in our region through monitoring and science programs. We use this information to make and advocate for better land use decisions and support planning and policy advocacy. And then we also use that information to inform communities about the environment and the way that they can protect it through education, outreach, and stewardship programs that we support. So I'm really grateful today to be able to present a little bit of our recent highlights on our regional outdoor water conservation framework and the recent changes that we've made to that framework. So a little bit of a background. We've had a regional water conservation framework since 2015. Some of you may recall back in 2015, we had an unprecedented drought year, and it really elevated the water restriction status of most areas in our region to levels that we had never seen before. This framework is collaboratively developed and defined in partnership with all of the major regional water service providers. It's designed with the intention that all providers can really see themselves within the framework. So the intention there is that within each of the levels that are established, the various regional partners can decide how they want to move through those levels. It has been shown to be very successful. So when it's implemented, we do see a sharp decline in water use, specifically in the higher stages. So when we move to levels 3 and 4, when we're responding to drought changes, drought levels from the province. And I will mention, this is just one tool that we have in our water conservation toolkit, and I will end the presentation just sharing some of those other tools that we have available as well to supplement this particular one. So the framework objectives are to create consistently defined watering restriction stages and to minimize confusion and to include all major water purveyors across the region. The idea here is that we want clear and defined communication tactics so that folks living across the region can really understand how to contribute to water conservation and what they're actually allowed to do during drought conditions. The second objective is to align media communication with comprehensive information on each major water system and their watering restriction stages. So this really helps in terms of some of the, the capacity that we have across the region, specifically supporting our smaller systems as well, in terms of getting that information out there to their residents. And then also you can see on the screen here, we host an interactive map that residents across the region can visit when they have questions about what watering restriction stages they're at in the summer. They can zoom in on that map to essentially find almost where they live, and then they can click on links on that map as well that will give them information and links to their respective water service providers. So the overall objective here, it provides a means to require outdoor water use reductions during these drought periods for operational needs. And the emphasis here is really on curtailing that non-essential or discretionary use that we see in the summer months. The nuance, though, is that we're really focused on minimizing impacts to connected creeks and streams at these critical times, which is not always a reflection of water system robustness, but we do acknowledge that these things are very much connected. Groundwater is connected to surface water, and acknowledging that through the choices that we make in use is essential during drought times. So in terms of the updates that we've made here in 2024, so why did we initiate this review process? Well, initially it's recognizing that the region is experiencing longer, hotter, drier summers. We're experiencing a changing climate, and we're seeing that year after year in the temperatures that we're seeing and the length of our drought seasons. The map on the side here is just a snippet from actually last year, the BC drought map. This snip was taken in late October 2023. And you can see that we were still in stage 3 from the province in late October, which if you kind of zoom back 10 years ago, that would have been very, very unusual to see a drought that late in the season. So since the implementation in 2016, we've also done no formal review process. And we really want to recognize that this framework is about adaptive management. We want to check in on it at regular intervals to ensure that it's working and that it's working in partnership and with this collaborative approach. And once again, this was the format of this review process. It was a collaborative process. So all of the water purveyors were invited to meetings. We held several meetings through the spring of this year to really have everyone inform sort of the best practices of how they see this process working to change some of the nuances in the framework. I just put this here to sort of highlight that since we implemented the framework in 2016, this is the watering restrictions that we've implemented within the water RDN water service areas. We have had to move progressively up into stage 4 in some of the more recent years. So we're certainly using this framework and implementing it and seeing it work in the community, seeing those sharp declines in use when we're able to implement it. So on to some of the updates that we've put into place here. So some nuances and how this has been updated. With the new level 3 previously was just voluntary restrictions. So we didn't ask anyone specifically within the bylaw to change any of their actions. What we've done now is we want to be more specific with what we're asking people to do. So we've changed level 3 to limiting lawn watering days to 1 day per week. So with odd numbers houses watering on Mondays and even numbered houses on Thursdays. So this can just guide people a little bit more in terms of what they can actually do to reduce that water use. The new level 4 now actually allows car and boat washing if a shutoff nozzle is utilized. And this just acknowledges that we're not shutting down any businesses when watering restrictions are implemented. So people can go and wash their car during watering restrictions, allowing them to do that at home. We're not seeing that as a real contribution to those high water uses. We've also formally extended the restriction period from April 1st to October 31st, again, acknowledging that the summers we're experiencing are longer and hotter and drier. So trying to kind of align the framework time period with when we are actually implementing these water conservation measures. And then last but not least, we've changed the name to Regional Outdoor Water Conservation Framework. And two key parts of this, we really want to emphasize outdoor. This isn't really about indoor use. This is about lawn sprinkling largely. And putting the word conservation in there instead of restrictions. We really want to acknowledge that this is about our shared resources and that this is about connecting it to other kind of aspects of our community in terms of water's recreational, cultural, and ecological values. I'm just looking at the time, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but just some of the finer details that we haven't altered within the framework are shown here. So things like private wells are not actually subject to this, but we do encourage folks who are on private wells to reduce their use during those hot summer months. And I'll skip to the bottom there, that vegetable gardens and fruit trees are always exempt from any watering bans. So just encouraging people that yes, your gardens, you can continue to water your vegetables and flowers during these times. So in terms of implementation, the Regional District of Nanaimo has adopted an amendment to bylaw number 1654, which regulates the terms and conditions under which water area is supplied. And we coordinate this framework through regular meetings with all of our partner water purveyors across the region throughout the summer months. And those meetings tend to be every month. But for example, as we've seen the province move into stage 3 drought, this past week, we will be having more meetings as a result of that. We also oversee communication strategies such as social media posts, door hangers, and stickers, as well as some radio advertisements that you might hear while you're driving around. And we maintain that central website that I shared with you at the beginning, where people can access a map to understand how watering restrictions are playing out in their particular neighborhood. So then just to leave you with some of the other tools that we have in our toolkit. So Team Water Smart works to teach residents about the importance of water stewardship and responsible use of this common resource. And then it really works to empower people with tools that they can implement in their own homes and communities. So we run workshops and events. We have school education programs taking grade 4 and 5 students up the Englishman River, for example. We do a residential irrigation checkup program. We have contests during the summer. And then we also have rebate programs that encourage people to actually implement change on their properties through rainwater harvesting systems, soil upgrades, and updates to their irrigation systems. So in conclusion, water service delivery and regional communications during the dry months is improved and strengthened through cooperative approaches such as this watering restriction framework. It provides tools for water purveyors across the region to respond to seasonal drought conditions. Collaborative approaches and communication and conservation between the RDN's major water purveyors streamlines communication resources and provides clarity for residents. And it also acknowledges that shared water resources that we rely on for drinking water, agricultural irrigation, recreational and cultural values, and essential ecosystem services are all connected. Thank you so much. I'll take any questions.
It's great, Eric. You did it. You're right on time. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's an amazing presentation. I'm so impressed. Thank you. Council, any questions for Eric at this time? Councilor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Forsman. Very insightful. Thank you. And quite appropriately timed, I guess, as we're coming the heat of summer. My question to you is about having these watering restrictions uniformly across the region. Last year, we had a challenge where Parksville was in stage 4 for, I would say, about 4 or 5 months. And the neighboring municipality, Qualicum Beach, stayed on level 2. So is there a way of communicating it better that all municipalities are following these and perhaps even enforcing it from the RDN or the provincial level?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'll just go back to the slide that does show the different stages of the water conservation framework. So the way this is really designed is that, as I mentioned, everyone can see themselves within it. So while one municipality may stay on stage 2 throughout the season, it's recognizing that across our region, we really have a mosaic in terms of the water availability and water resources we have. Different communities are on different aquifers that respond to infiltration rates quite differently. We have some communities, of course, who do have surface water resources that they can rely on. We don't have a centralized system that is sort of going into elevated drought conditions at the same time necessarily. So the purpose of this, in terms of this watering restriction framework, is that everyone, if subscribing to it at the same time, allows us to communicate it out appropriately. That one area may be in a slightly elevated level, while your neighbor may not, because you may be pulling from a different aquifer in that regard. So that's the intention of it, to sort of streamline communications, even though there may be sort of a sort of patchwork quilt in terms of what different levels that we're at.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our delegation, thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting. And as Councilor Gore said, timely with the sprinklers popping on there as we are in the presentation. I appreciate the work being done to adapt the grid, in particular level 3. And one item of feedback I've heard quite a bit in the community is kind of like a perceived hypocrisy almost with community assets being watered while people can't water their own lawns or trees or that sort of thing. And I think that does speak to a good thing in that people want to comply. They want to be good neighbors and good members of the community in terms of their conservation. But they then see, other things that are green and theirs isn't green. So can any more be done to add within the grid, like an explanation of maybe some exemptions for public infrastructure? Like, yes, we do need to water some things like a field that's used all the time by sports teams and all that sort of thing, but it's not outlined in there, I don't think. So it might be nice to see some of those things in there so that when people are thinking, oh, well, why do they get to do it and I don't? It's actually in the actual matrix. That would be one question or recommendation I would have. And then also just, I guess, further communication around that specific thing there about, why can I do it and I can't do this and what can I do? For example, watering during the watering restrictions last year, I think there are people who stopped watering things that they really still could have watered. And like, trees and gardens and that sort of thing when they didn't actually need to stop doing that. So any thoughts on that and how that could be improved?
Yeah, in response, I think there's always room for improvement in terms of the communications. And I think that the intention of how this is rolled out is that each municipality has the opportunity to sort of adopt a bylaw that has the specificity written into it that addresses your own infrastructure. The RDN itself, the way that the bylaw is worded for the regional district, we don't oversee any particular sports fields that would apply to, but in regards to, Parksville, that may be adjusted appropriately for your needs and purposes. So certainly, and when people go to this website, we do encourage folks to then kind of go through to their own municipality's website to better understand any specifics in terms of how those restrictions are being applied. In some ways, it is a bit of an umbrella approach, and it's sometimes for simplicity's sake to see an overall reduction. It's sometimes nice to not get people too lost in the details, but certainly we respond to a lot of questions from residents who are interested in those details and happy to continue doing so through Team Water Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I recognize that like so many things in our region, this is another example of where the regional district kind of creates an umbrella and then there are some exceptions within municipalities, but most people don't understand that. So that's where, for sure, having it in a matrix like this that is kind of harmonized across the region, and hopefully then does incorporate things like Councillor Gore raised with Qualcom Beach maybe not being there, and then certain assets that are still totally cool to be watering, basically, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
And any other questions? Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much to our delegation. I really appreciate some of the clarification with this recommended update, particularly that it specifies we're talking about lawn watering. I know that in the past, based on questions or comments in the community, that when it just says watering, people think it means everything, and understanding that it's the lawn watering that really takes up and really increases the water use. So, and in terms of car and boat. Question that I do have is that is this update already in place? This is recommended, this is coming. At what point does this become actuality? So that's what I was wondering about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. We've already implemented this bylaw for Regional District of Nanaimo water systems. And we're at the stage right now where we're encouraging our municipal partners as well as electoral districts, improvement districts rather, to update their bylaws and policies to reflect this. This framework works best when it's collaboratively applied across the region so people can really kind of get on board with understanding where that communications hub is. We do find that, people don't always know exactly where they live, for example, whether they live in Parksville or electoral area F, for example. So the intention is that, through this delegation today, there is consideration of updating your bylaw to reflect what we've implemented already in the RDN.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, did you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And appreciate the presentation. It's just excellent. When we have one community compared to another in our region, Oceanside, is it good to explain that where the water comes from your perspective? Because from what I understand, I'm not 100%, but I think Qualicum's is a different system than ours. And that's why they probably have that stage 2 and stage 4. This is what I'm thinking as a citizen. I don't know. What is your perspective on that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And yes, indeed, across the region, there are many different sources that municipalities and improvement districts and private well owners are collecting their water from. And when you look at sort of the complex aquifer maps and the surface water licenses that are used across the region, they do all behave quite differently. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that in terms of how different restrictions are implemented. But I will emphasize that a big part of these watering restrictions are also responding to what we're seeing in terms of provincial drought levels, and that's informed by things like stream flow levels. So while people may be collecting their water from different systems, those systems are connected in many ways to different, environmental considerations. But yes, that is a big part of it. And in terms of one of the objectives that we try to achieve through Team Water Smart is working to educate people about the specificity of their water resource. They have that sense of kind of collective responsibility for it or their particular water community. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Erica, for the presentation. Two questions. My first is, how do the restrictions, if at all, apply to private water licenses, say along the Englishman River? And I could have emailed you, so hopefully it's not like a gotcha question. I didn't mean to bring it up in a public meeting, but I was just curious. And I'll let you answer that first before I get to my second one.
Yeah, certainly. That's a great question. So these watering restrictions do not apply to
Sure.
private water licenses. So if you are on a private well or you have a surface water license, there's no way to enforce that.
Sure.
Water licensees from the province do have an allowable amount they're allowed to pull. And the province's responsibility to have a handle on that. But this particular framework applies to folks who are on a specific
Sure.
water system. Yeah.
Thank you. And another question, if
Follow
I may. Thank you, Chair. The other thing I was thinking of is this is all a complaints-driven process for the most part. And I see, 2 hours max, for instance, on one of the watering times, say in both levels 2 and 3 for lawns. If someone was kind of spite watering for 2 hours, isn't that using kind of more water than if they were doing 5 minutes a day for 7 days a week? And it'd be a more even water usage and a little bit easier to track. And maybe the lawn is happier with kind of like 5 minutes of on a regular schedule. I'm just kind of throwing that out there as well. I am not a biologist, but I'm wondering that. Thanks.
I would be challenged as well to speak to sort of exactly how, grass or something responds to when you're watering. But we do find that people generally do adhere to these watering restrictions. I mean, what we've seen is there is a drop off in water use that is, marked at a system level when we do implement them. So it's largely voluntary. We don't do a lot of sort of policing of these watering restrictions. We simply don't have the capacity to do that. I think that people do care about their connection to their water and their environment. This is just a way that we can really clearly roll out that communication program. Of course, there's bylaws attached to it so that if we do notice that people are really, spitefully watering their lawn and things like that, we do have those tools in our toolkit. But this framework, coupled with a lot of our education and outreach programs, we feel does a pretty good job in reducing water use when it's needed. Yeah.
Thank you. Erica, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate everything you've done and keep up the great job.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm going to do another call out for our first delegation that was a no-show earlier. We've had some new arrivals in the audience. Is there a Tarnowski in the audience that was going to heard as a delegation today? A Tarnowski, still a no-show. That was okay. We'll carry on. Thank you, everyone. Okay, council, now we're going on to our first report, the Manager of Administration Services regarding the business license application for Oceanside Rentals. Oh, sorry, I'm going to turn this. I'm going to make this last. Okay, let's go on to the next one because they could still actually show up and do it. Their personal information would be important. Okay, let's move on to the next report on the agenda, which would be the Director of Community Planning and Building Development Permit application for 1180 Resort Drive to continue issuance of a development permit. There we go. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? As noted, moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? Councillor Gower.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to staff. I was looking at some of the reports related to this project. When was the last traffic impact assessment done for this proposal?
If I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Gore, it would have been done at the time of rezoning, which I believe was pushing about 3 years ago.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. One more question is about the DPA and the variances. During the presentation, Greg mentioned that they are asking even a variance instead of 20-meter tree buffer, they're going for a 10 meters. Is that correct? And if you can speak to the other variances that are being sought for this application.
Certainly, if I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Gore. So the variance isn't specific to the tree buffer. They are proposing a 10-meter tree buffer on a site that has no trees and is primarily invasive species. With respect to the other variances, it's primarily related to the underground parking. So it's below grade where it won't be visible principally. So there's a 1.5 meter setback for part of the underground parking and a 5 meter for another section of the underground parking. There's a slight relaxation for a couple of the balconies on one of the buildings. And then there's the height variance, as has been indicated, to facilitate extra insulation to help achieve the guidelines with respect to energy conservation.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm probably going to sound like a broken record here, but I just wanted to mention that both the provincial and federal governments, multiple parties, this is exactly what they are asking municipalities to do across Canada, is to build long-term rentals for people who cannot afford a $55,000 down payment on single-family detached housing. It's not short-term rentals. And so I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Grens.
Thank you. I'll build on that as well and just note that we do need more rental housing in our community and across the province, and the opportunity for people to move into different modalities of housing in different ages and stages of life. It also does include 3-bedroom units, which is wonderful to see because it allows for families to also be in the region. And I love that there's underground parking and that it minimizes the automobile as a featured element of the development and puts that underground. And I'm looking forward to seeing that pathway, which will make it easier to get through from that part of the community over to the downtown and the community park and shopping opportunities. And I appreciate the work done by all the different parties to massage this project to get to the point where it is today, because it looks like it's going to be an exciting project, which will be replacing a lot of invasive plants with hopefully some happy families and some beautiful landscaping as well. So I'll vote in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Grens. I will be supporting this project. I'm very excited to see it go through. I'm very excited to see the last of the gorse on that property. It's been a pain for at least 20 years for anybody that deals with it. I'm also impressed with the this development actually helping us meet our goals before those goals are actually imposed upon us. We're getting ahead of it before saying that Parksville is very progressive at identifying the needs for rentals in our community. And this is going to go a long way to help this, and with consideration of a following phase as well, to make that a continuous pathway along 19A makes it also a very special entrance to our city as well, a safe entrance coming into city, hooking up with Resort Drive. So I'm appreciative for that as well. It's touched off a number of family-friendly amenities as well in the community itself. And for this development, I'm very impressed. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Bill. Sorry, I wouldn't have included that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do appreciate that we do need additional rental. We need more rental in the area. What we really need is non-market rental, to be honest. We need both, but we certainly need more non-market rental. According to some calculations for the whole area, I'm talking whole Oceanside area, we would need over 1,000 in order for people to be at a point where they're not paying more than 30% of their income on rent. But that being said, I will absolutely support this proposal. I think it's an excellent looking development, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into that. And who knows, perhaps when this company has finished developing this area, perhaps they can lend a hand to helping us get some of that non-market rental in place. You know, there's a throw down the gauntlet and perhaps lend a hand somewhere with for those folks who are trying to get that going as well. But it looks like a real quality design. Lots of beautiful thoughts gone into this, and I think it'll be a real asset to the community.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Note that Councillor Gore is opposed. That carries. Thank you. Now, the next report on the, I don't know if you want to leave now, you're welcome to leave. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I'll take a quick break to allow you to leave. You've been sitting in here and it's not exactly cool in here. So yeah, you're welcome to leave. I'll just take a 30-second. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your attendance all. Great, Council. So now the next report on the agenda is from the Director of Community Planning and Building. Follow-up report, consideration of an application for a zoning and development bylaw amendment at 365 Moliette Street, South Drive. For further consideration of zoning and development bylaw amendment application. And to be clear, this is a totally different development that we've been talking about today, folks. This is over on Moliette, and I believe it's the housing assisted living for, I believe the company is called Connect for those with brain injury. This project is being proposed for 365 Moliette Street. So Council, you have all the rest of the information in your background information. Do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Beal. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Grant.
So I do have maybe a couple questions for the Director of Planning that I did ask earlier, and I might just ask those in email, but I wonder what the classification of this property might be by BC Assessment, and whether that'll affect in any way the sort of the tax burden, and or whether it would get a permissive tax exemption. We're looking at about a $1 million land lift with the zoning change. So I don't know, if just something to flag, I guess.
Mr. Russell, can you comment on that? This to me, for property tax exemption would require to be in the hospital realm under the guide of Island Health, I would assume. For that question, I'm not sure if Connect is a nonprofit that they'd be looking for. Was any of that mentioned at the time, Mr. Russell?
If I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Grenz. I don't have a specific answer to that question. In some ways, it can be unknown. So, we don't know specifically how BC Assessment will assess the property, what classification it will ultimately fall under, and whether or not something may or may not be eligible for future tax exemptions or not. That's something that's determined by an agency that isn't the city. And that's going to depend on the particulars of how it's going to be operated and what they may or may not be eligible for. And I'm going to use a terrible analogy, but it's kind of like a rebate for your furnace. Like, you might be eligible for a rebate for your furnace to replace it with something, and you might not. And it's going to depend on what the criteria and guidelines and what program is in place at that time. And we just simply don't know at this time. I'm certainly happy to reach out to the proponent between now and when this application returns to council and to September to see if they have any more information on it or not. But I suspect that they won't know until they're up and running what they may or may not be eligible for. And in the same way that they don't know whether council would give them a tax exemption as part of some kind of, you know, ask or contribution, right? Those are all unknown things until that comes up. So, but I will certainly ask them and see if there's any additional information that I could bring to council for September when first reading is for consideration.
I think that'd be helpful. Mr. Russell, thank you. Councilor Grant, follow up.
Yeah, thank you. That's, I understand we're not moving into first reading or anything like that yet, but it'd be helpful to get the full picture of what sort of the community is going to be contributing to this beyond what is being provided by Island Health and the nonprofit organization.
Thank you. I will be supporting this application mainly for the fact of what it actually is consisting of. The Connect organization, they did presentation to ourselves and our CAO anyways and described for brain injury victims and so forth. The rehabilitation is long and enduring and it requires very special care. They chose Parksville and they chose this location because it's Parksville and the being very close to our Springwood Park, our wetlands area as well is very beneficial for those seeking rehabilitation after strokes and brain injuries. And the location is key, and as well as right across the street from a grocery store, a grocery center as well, and a pharmacist is also right across the street. So they strategically chose this location. They've worked very hard at making this a non-obtrusive development. If you've looked at the plans, the architect met with us personally and asked us what we wanted. We said right at the very start, we don't want a good project, we want a great project. You've heard that line before. I'm kind of overusing it, but I do. And they came back and the architect was very sensitive to that, and they showed us the plans, and I'm very excited to see this go through because I know that in our area there's very a large number of individuals that could certainly benefit from this project coming to City of Parksville. So I will be supporting this. Is there any further questions or comments at this time? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you, council. Sorry. Oh, I see. Okay. If I may ask, Amanda, do we have any notification that there's an individual online for the delegation or for this presentation? Oh, okay. So, okay, we're just looking for that missing delegation. We'll continue the search. Thank you. The next report on the agenda is the Manager of Utilities Water Use Planning and Management Study to seek approval to proceed with posting request for proposal number 2240-20-WPS Water Use Planning and Management Study. I'm going to ask for a mover or seconder, but I'm going to move this one first. This is an exciting day for me. So I would like to move this. Do I have a seconder for this as well? We'll open it for discussion. Seconded by Councillor Wood. Thank you. The discussion now, this is the water management study that we've included in our strategic plan, and council supported it. And it's been a long time coming, and I want to say how appreciative I am for the staff participation in this, doing it from a very scientific point of view and professional point of view as well. This is the very first important step to assure water sustainability for the City of Parksville. And this is going long-term. This is going at least a 50-year look into the future. And so I am very excited about this. And this is, you know where this came from and you know what it involves. If you have any further questions, I believe Mr. Simon Doran is on the listed. He's in the house, so to speak. So if there's any further questions, but further comments at this time, go ahead. Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. This does look very interesting, very comprehensive. But I have a few questions. looking at this and perhaps just doing some of my own research, what we've already done, to me, it seems like a lot of duplication. Just looking at the terms of reference for this, ERWS is already doing its study. We have a water master plan coming up. And we are spending close to $1 million to study the studies that have been done and compiling them. When we've had staff presentation to council a few months ago, where they said our current water system, including the climate change projections, will be able to provide enough water up to 2043, if I remember that correctly. So we have a good 20 years time where we are good, including climate change projections and everything. So my question through you to staff is, why don't we make it really focused on building additional reservoir, whether either it's for distribution or upland storage, alternate like source storage. Even that, I was looking at references and I did not find the Shelton Lake study that was done in 2012 as one of the reference documents that staff might be looking at. So I'm just a bit confused why this very long study of 4 or 5 years and nothing really will come out other than recommendations. I think this is time for action. If we are serious about supplementing and increasing more storage, more redundancy and robust water supply, I think we just need to build some additional storage, look at Shelton Lake or other lakes as possible options, and just get on it. Like, honestly, just spend that money towards that rather than hiring more consultants, spending taxpayer money on more studies at this time. This is my take on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gore. I'm going to address a couple of things there. The suggestion for reservoir storage is listed right in it as one of the optional options for the water, anyways, the water reservoirs to be increased. That's one of it, but all the other consultant reports that you talked about, whether it was Shelter Lake and all the rest of it, and all the other up in the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere, all the consultants will have access to every one of those reports. In fact, it has already been prepared for in the RFP package. They will have access to all of those studies that are already done. And furthermore, we have, as council, we have allocated in our budget anyways, up to $750,000 for the study. Realize that that is not necessarily the cost. That is what we have allocated up to and for, and realize also, let's put it absolutely clear, that it's not taxpayer dollars, that is grant money that we have received. But it is not raised by property taxes is what I'm getting at. It does not necessitate any property tax increase at this time. So I think it's very astute for our staff to do this, but as well as the rest of the study that maybe you do not agree with, the rest of the study is going to look at addressing some things that have happened on our ERWS water treatment plant. There have been some design deficiencies that have been identified, and this will also help to remediate some of those systems that are not performing to optimum performance. And that's exactly what we want to do, because we don't want to waste any water. So Mr. Doiron, did you want to answer anything further on that, or is that?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay. I just want to make a correction. I know I've only been here a little while. It's true that you have a lot, or City of Parksville has a lot of water out of 8 months, but there's 4 months out of the year that you are where we're hurting for water. So, and one of the things that this study will do is to identify, okay, yeah, you're gonna need a dam or more reservoirs, but that is the solution to get to those 4 months comfortably operationally. I just want to add that. Okay.
Thank you. And also the timeline that was mentioned by Councillor Gore, if you notice that the timeline for the RFPs to come back from the consultants is very tight. I believe the requests for all bids for the Simon, if you could.
August, I believe it was August 12th, and the final report sometime next February.
Right, yeah, and so that's, yeah, exactly, for completion for next February. So it was, you were suggesting maybe 3 to 5 years before we start implementing anything. Well, that's simply not true. Councillor Gore.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So there's some, again, this is to our staff. Perhaps the mayor knows he may chip in because you're also on the ERWS Water Board. But we have something called the City of Parksville Water Study Updates that we do every 5 years. What was the last time we had an water study update? That was one of the I read the one from 2005. It was given to one of our community members. And one of the recommendations from the 2005 study was that this to be done every 5 years. When was the last water study update done?
DAO Kaler, can you, Simon wouldn't have been here to address that, but can you, a 5-year water study, I'm not sure what,
No. So in
Mr. Mayor,
2000,
if I may,
yes, go ahead, sir.
I believe he may be talking about the province's allocation study was done in 2019, and it was supposed to be the province that was supposed to do or update it at every 5 years, and that was never done by the province.
Yes, I'm not aware of any other.
I can save my questions, Mayor, if other council has questions, but I have another question I can ask.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a question. I just want to let you know my experience in Victoria with shortage of water. In the 90s, we had a situation in Victoria where we could not flush our toilets unless we had to. And we had brown grass. It was terrible. Honestly, I could not believe it. I think it needs to be known. If people don't know this. And what they did was, it was decided, but there were certain people that did not want trees to be taken down. Well, the trees were taken down and you may have lived there at that time, Mr. Mayor. And they took the trees down at the reservoir in Souk, and they have more water than they need now. So there's always a solution. We just have to figure out what the solution is here, because there is a solution. We have 26 lakes up here, an hour from here, besides Arrowsmith. And so there's certainly a solution, and we shouldn't be, worried about it. We need to do something about it. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor
I
Martin.
just said.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to comment on this, it's part of our strategic plan to look at water use and management. And also, while there have been, of course, lots of water studies, BC is experiencing the lowest snowpack that it's seen since in the 70s. And so I think this is money well spent to get the latest data and make sure we are looking ahead. And if there is infrastructure to be built, that we build it for the latest data that we have. So I just thought I'd mention that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you that this is a significant step for this council to take this water study forward. It's as we just had the presentation from the regional district around watering restrictions, and we're heading into the summer season. We're reminded again about some of the apprehension people have around available potable water for the community. And I think we have a responsibility as a council to prepare for the future, and the future is changing as the climate is changing. And so we need to make sure that we position ourselves. And what the water study allows us to do is measure twice before we cut a big check in this case, before we cut the check. And we need to make sure we get that right. There have been some steps along the way in managing our water that have maybe been a little step foot wrong. And that's a lot of discussion in the community around that. It's time to put everything on the right track with the water system in our communities so that we have a predictable supply of water for decades to come. And that's what this study will do. So I'm very pleased to support this.
Thank you. I like that analogy. Measure twice, cut the check once. I caught that. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will be supporting this and picking up on what Councillor Grenz was mentioning. I think this serves not only to give us the most current, up-to-date information, taking current situation factors and going into the future, taking all of that into consideration. I think it will also serve to communicate to all of our residents, and hopefully they will I think I know that people are very interested in knowing what our situation is with water and going forward, sorry. But I know that there's also a lot of misunderstanding out there about what the role of water conservation is, what that means for our community. And so I think that having this study will not only help inform us as to the best route going forward, but also serve to communicate with the residents from an unbiased source as to what our situation is and what we need to do, and hopefully reassure people that we are on the right track.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Any other first speakers? No? Okay, Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, like this is not about me being against studying the water. We know everybody in Parksville talks about water storage. Everybody's worried about the construction and the development going on in Parksville. So for me to say, hey, I'm voting against this study, it's not to say that I don't want to study the water or our future security of water. My biggest concern is we already have all this information. I would support something if we are looking at building additional storage. Specifically, I would support that. I would support monies going towards that. And I'll tell you why. And first of all, we are talking about a resource that's provincially owned. We are talking about water that's shared regionally. So why is there no funding? I know they talk about the grant funding possibly, but this should be undertaken by the province. If it's about spending the money, then the province should be spending their monies. RDN should be spending their monies. So why is Parksville even spending $750,000 of their grant funding to do this water study when we have enough studies to tell us, looking at the additional storage that we need? That's where the focus should be, rather than compiling 5 years of more studies. So that's why I will not support the way it's presented right now.
Okay, I'm just going to call the question. All those in favor? And all those opposed? That is opposed by Councillor Gore. Thank you. That carries. Thank you. The next report on the agenda from the corporate officer is regarding the Parksville Downtown Business Improvement Area, the PDBIA petition, to provide council with the results of the PDBIA petition process. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? That is moved by Councillor Gren, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. The next report on the agenda is from the CAO regarding the Emergency Management Oceanside Extreme Heat Response, to provide council with information on the city's response to extreme hot weather events in the 2024 summer season. And it's warm enough in here right now. That's why we have the door open. Thank you, CAO Kaler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously, this has been a topic of conversation for quite some time, and there's a lot of confusion, I think, out in the community and sometimes even within the social service agencies over who should be doing what. So we had talked to council previously about doing something like this, where we would really explain kind of who does what, where, and when. And just for council's information, a very similar staff report and presentation will be done at the Town of Qualicum Beach and the Regional District Board as well. And we work together as municipal governments on delivering emergency services as a regional approach, just because of capacity. We only have so many volunteers and so many facilities, and so we work very closely together. We were hoping to get this to council before the heat emergency, but I am very happy with how things went this recent couple of weeks. And we've benefited quite well, I think, from having Kate as our EPC, connecting with folks and sharing her knowledge and guiding people through that process as well. So I'll just kind of launch into it. One of the questions that we get that I think quite often is, why is the city not doing something about homelessness? And so we wanted to clarify the role of the Ministry of Housing, specifically BC Housing, and some of the other provincial agencies. So For those that may not know, the Ministry of Housing is a newly created ministry in 2022 under this current government. And it was really created as a standalone ministry in recognition of the range of housing challenges that we face in BC. This is directly from their website, so I'm not going to read through it as line by line, but essentially the ministry's goal is to work with Indigenous communities and a broad spectrum of agencies and advocates to make sure that we have just they call it the spectrum of housing. So that includes non-market housing, supportive housing, affordable housing, co-op housing, everything you can think about. And then the ministry funds this work and works with different experts to address different types of housing challenges. So on the ministry's website, specifically for BC Housing, they have an excellent resource called Belonging BC that really talks about just the reasons why we are where we are and how we can help those in the community dealing with different kinds of housing challenges. And so just from their service plan, again, just to kind of reiterate that there's already a lot of taxpayer money at the provincial level going into these different initiatives. I've just listed some of them here again from the ministry service plan, and the links are in the staff reports to most of these things. These are in the millions. So I guess as a local level of government, we want to be prudent and not duplicating or voluntarily accepting responsibility for something that a senior level of government is already kind of the expert on and is already working with appropriate partners, and including provincial and federal government agencies and social service providers in the communities. So BC Housing's mandate is to provide housing for, again, we mentioned this spectrum of different things, but they do accept or say that their responsibility is for shelter. So when we're looking at the absolute homelessness, then BC Housing is kind of the lead agency provincially that works with folks in communities and other levels of government to ensure that there's adequate shelter. I would say they would admit themselves that they're not there and there's a lot of gaps, but it is their jurisdiction to work on this. And they will reach out to local governments at times. And at the end of this presentation, I'll mention some of the things that Parksville has done working with the ministry in this regard. So one of the recent things that have been implemented is this Hearth approach, and that's really their focus is to get people out of camps or encampments into dignified, longer-term housing. And they are actually trying to move away from shelters as even a form of housing. It's not really a form of housing. It's just an emergency situation to get people into housing. And so supportive housing and more creative types of housing like pod housing, where they would, similar to a university dorm, you have folks living together, sharing things like kitchens and amenity space, but you're not at university. It's a long-term situation. So you have people there watching out for each other and helping support each other. So those types of things are piloted in Vancouver, and they're actually quite interesting. So BC Housing, as I mentioned, is in charge of the shelter program, and they have a number of different things that they bring to different communities, mostly depending on the size and scale of the challenges in each community. And so in some cases, they have year-round shelters open 24 hours a day, kind of like a drop-in during the day. They're open 365 days a year. They have things like counseling or laundry or social supports or doctors and nurses coming. So they're a little bit more permanent, or they are more permanent in terms of the service they provide, even though for an individual, it isn't a permanent housing solution. In some communities, and Parksville has had this in the past, they operate temporary cold weather shelters, and those are sort of seasonal or time bound. They usually open on November 1st and are funded until March 31st. And BC Housing doesn't deliver the service themselves. They partner with an agency in the community and they pay for that service. So they provide money. In the past, it has been to Island Crisis Care, and they provide that money to a few organizations in Nanaimo, including them. And then really it's kind of like November 1st, it activates, they submit their plan annually, and the funding, I wouldn't say it's guaranteed, but the funding is pretty much guaranteed for those facilities. And then the more recent thing that has just changed, and I think this is where there's a lot of confusion, the Emergency Management Act just was amended to put regulations in place for an additional emergency weather condition. So when the temperature in BC or in our part of BC drops to -4 degrees Celsius or 0 degrees Celsius, where Environment Canada has issued an extreme weather alert, then there's another trigger. And that is basically funded through the Emergency Management Ministry. So they partner together and they provide funding for people to either ramp up their existing services like extended hours, if they need to provide additional supplies to individuals, or if they need to do additional outreach or open up new beds in maybe an area that's not always used for that. And that funding is provided through a task number. So local governments can actually channel that money to social service providers when the temperature hits that limit. So we have also done that here in Parksville and in Oceanside. When it's the conditions meet the regulations, then that money is again almost guaranteed, I would say, not 100%. There are requirements and lots of paperwork that you need to fill out. And so Kate actually takes the lead on kind of brokering those funds for our social service providers when those situations occur. So in terms of the overall picture, BC Housing, Emergency Management, as I just mentioned, which is a new ministry as well, local governments and social service providers all work together to determine where the gaps are, what different types of contributions can be made, and then figure out a plan on who does what and when. So as I mentioned, BC Housing is really the lead agency for the more extreme spectrum ends of homelessness. And they work with communities and social service providers to try and get people out of those dangerous, kind of precarious situations where they're maybe in an encampment with no facility, like no sanitation, or, they're really just not an ideal situation. BC Housing also approves the Extreme Weather Plan, is what EWR stands for. And that is submitted from a social service provider, and they seek that approval by September 30th every year. And it guarantees them the funding for what's in their plan. So that can be extreme heat and extreme cold, but it basically just lays out what's available in the community, what facilities, staffing, supplies, and what's the action plan for that extreme weather. And then BC Housing funds whatever's in that plan. They also select the social service agencies, that's what SSA stands for, and they fund them. So there's a process, they usually say they put out a call, there's a process for those operators to submit their bids and then kind of present their plan, and then they get the funding through that stream. BC Housing also funds supportive housing projects. So that's like Orca Place here, or projects for seniors like we have with Hustwick and a few other places in town. They also fund local community providers to do homelessness prevention. And that's things like rent subsidies, helping connect people with services, helping people move from one facility to another as they kind of progress along the spectrum. And here in the city of Parksville, SOS is designated as the homeless prevention contact. And then they do a lot, they're very busy. They also provide funding for affordable housing. So that's when they work with folks like in our town, we have Bolinas Housing. 77 units are currently in operation there, for example, that BC Housing provides the funding for that. So lots of different options for housing in that ministry. The Emergency Management and Climate Readiness Ministry, which again is this new stream that I've just mentioned, they provide the supplemental funding outside of the regular seasonal plan for when those couple of days where the temperature is either very, very hot or very, very cold, and it's creating a life threat to people who might be having to either live with that in their home or live with that out in the community. They also provide planning support and recovery for emergencies. So in a lot of communities, luckily for us, we're not one that suffers with wildfires. But a lot of these things happen simultaneously with other emergencies. So extreme weather can often lead to power outages, for example, or flooding. And in the summertime, forest fires and extreme heat go together. So it's basically unifying some of those community emergencies and providing support for them in a more collaborated way. Local governments are responsible for creating plans for every emergency you can imagine. We have a hazard risk assessment in Parksville right now, which I think identifies around 45 different hazards. And then we have to put a plan in place on how we would address them. And then we also manage at the local level land use regulations and permitting for uses in the community. And we've talked about this a lot at council in terms of, you know, occupancy, fire safety, access and egress from buildings. We coordinate that emergency funding under the task number, as I mentioned. And also the city can give permissive tax exemptions and grants to social service agencies where they believe that's warranted. They can donate land and or facilities to allow access to that for these purposes. And we are responsible for sharing during emergencies across the region. You might have noticed we share the provincial heat kind of guidance a couple of days usually before. And we often, like during COVID, we would get information directly from the medical health officer, and then we would convey that out to the community. So we're kind of a touch point for provincial information that they want to get out. And then lastly, but definitely not least on the list, we have the social service agencies, and they are funded primarily through different provincial agencies. But in this particular case, they're getting their funding from BC Housing and the Climate Readiness Ministry, and in some cases, the Mental Health and Addictions Ministry. And they basically work with, they have the experts who know who is vulnerable, what supports they need, where they're best served, you know, whether outreach is better or setting up clinics or whatever that might be. And we look to them to identify gaps during the emergencies and then fund those through those task numbers. So we're not going to talk too much today about the extreme weather for cold events, because we are going to be bringing something back in the fall. And positive news, and perhaps Councillor Beale might want to speak to this at some point, but the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness has a draft plan for winter, and we're meeting with them in September at the staff level to see how and where we might fit into that. And they are looking to bring something to council after BC Housing approves it, which I believe is hopefully imminent. But basically our main role as the city there is to trigger that funding and funnel it through to the emergency providers. We also tend to get approval in advance if they know what they need, so that we know we can give them guidance on, no, that's not going to be covered, so you need to find more money or different money for that. But it just helps them plan ahead as to what we're able to provide. And then this council has also approved extending our hours during those temperature times. And that money has been provided to us for the extra security cost from the task number funding. Okay, so extreme heat, we have just experienced this, and there's no regulation per se on this, but there is guidance. And so that's part of that extreme heat alert. When the province said that we were going into that temperature condition about 10 days ago, we reached out through our staff to all of the different groups in town and asked what different things they might need. And we were able to get funding for a host of response, including outreach, some supplies like misters, cooling towels, electrolytes, bottled water, those types of things. And there were a couple of cooling locations as well. So in BC, every public library is designated as a community heating or warming and cooling space. So during their operating hours, that's available to anyone. We also have our City Hall facilities and other regional and Town of Qualicum facilities that are open during our hours. And this time we extended till 7 p.m. on the advice of our emergency coordinator. And that was covered by the province. And then we're really, really lucky here that we have a lot of outdoor opportunities for folks. And those are listed there. So again, just to kind of clarify, the social services are provincial responsibility or a provincial mandate. Most municipalities, especially our size, do not tax or provide additional social services. Some larger cities have been, I believe, kind of forced into that just because of the severity of the issues they're dealing with. And that creates a little bit of confusion because people say, oh, well, Abbotsford does this or Nanaimo does that or some other city does whatever. But in Oceanside, we do not have that as a social service. And in fact, I believe the RDN board presented that option as a regional option at the end of 2022, and it was not approved. And so we don't voluntarily take that on and spend local taxpayer money on that service. And then the extreme weather response plan, which would be approved by BC Housing, could, as I mentioned, provide for all kinds of extreme weather. It doesn't have to be just cold weather. And they would then have knowledge of their base funding that they would have for the season. And as I mentioned, cities can get the money for them if they have supplemental needs during those extremes. So in Parksville, even though it's not directly the city's mandate, I think councils over the years have recognized the importance of contributing to housing. And specifically for sort of the non-market housing, the city donated the land for Orca Place a couple of years back. We currently have an open letter of intent to donate city land to the Parksville Lions for a workforce housing project. And in the last 10 years, the city has waived DCCs, which are development cost charges that are applicable to new units. And that has been for around $775,000 worth of costs that developers would have had to pay. We also have priority status for applications that are to develop affordable housing in the community that meets our definition in our bylaw. And we have policy that we waive the building permit fees and the development permit fees for eligible affordable housing. And that's been around $80,000 worth of fees in the last 8 to 10 years. And then the city every year grants permissive tax exemptions. It's usually about 20 to 22 organizations that apply, and it's around 200,000 every year. It was 225,000 in 2024. I think that's it. And so, yeah, we just wanted to clarify the roles. And as I mentioned, we'll have the extreme cold in a little bit more detail coming to council in the fall.
Thank you so much, Sayo Kaler. It's very timely with this, and also very important that we all understand our roles and responsibilities that we have at all the different levels of government. And that clarifies it all, and the public will be pleased to understand, you know, what Parksville's contribution is and what our role is in this. And I can say for the extreme heat that we're experiencing right now with the EMO management system is that those service providers have been identified. Those services are being provided for those individuals that are on the street right now experiencing the effects of the heat. And it was basically, I don't want to say seamless because staff just make it seem that way, but it was a seamless flow through of funding from the government to the service provider to make sure that those needs were being met on a timely manner, and it worked well. And so my hats off to our staff, our EMO staff, as well as everybody that made that come into play. I'm excited that we're going to have a plan as well that we're talking about for the winter, because we know that's coming too, folks, and it's just, we're done. Not gonna always just be dealing with heat. So that's, and with the same vigor that we've approached this one, I believe that we'll have a proper plan in place. So it's not, the panic button isn't hit during the first snowfall. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of our staff anyways for making this a reality. Any questions or comments for our CAO? Councillor Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kiva. It's excellent to know that there is a solution and that we can go ahead and have a plan and be organized and support our community, you know, organizations in whatever way we can, because I feel that's a responsibility of us. And as counselors, I can feel confident that you're doing what's necessary for us to have a guideline as to what we need to know. So thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bill, did you have your hand up? Yes, Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to our CAO. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I certainly agree that there's that ongoing confusion between the cold weather reality and the extreme weather. And so it's helpful to get that, and probably needs to be gone over, you know, repeatedly or frequently. One question I had about this last slide, I'm just curious, the last line there, permissive tax exemptions to over 20. So there are more than 22 organizations that are related to housing, or is I'm just a little bit surprised that, like, is it including places, I don't know, like Stanford Place or Trillium and others, or is this go beyond with tax exemptions?
Thank you. If I might, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that includes all of our social service tax exemptions. So we're basically looking at the SOS, we don't usually have to give permissive tax exemptions to a place like Stanford Place because they're statutorily exempt. But we had 22 people apply for we have to do a bylaw every year by October. For the 2024 year, we had to do that last October. And so there was 22 social service providers that were granted exemptions to their property taxes. So it's, well, I don't really want to, well, it's actually public, but it's like Ford House and SOS and Orca. Well, actually Orca's statutorily exempt, but they do provide other services. So yes, anyone, they have to own the property because it's a property tax exemption. So there's 20 to 22 that apply every year for the last 17 years. I think we've had that in place.
Any more questions for CAO Kaler? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just make a quick comment that looking at the last slide, again, it's praiseworthy what Parksville has done and continues to do. And I'll echo the comments previously made by the council to provide the need for more of non-market housing is increasing, not that people are getting poorer, it's just the inflation is not able to catch up with the wages, and people who used to be able to afford market housing are actually falling into the need for non-market housing even when they're working. So we're doing great. There's always a need to do more, not just for people who need supportive and housing, and not just non-market housing because people are not able to pay their bills. My question to staff is in terms of the extreme weather response. So you mentioned that emergency planning is a municipal function. When it comes to emergency weather response, we need to have a plan. So when we say we need to have a plan, is it Parksville or are we talking EMO, including Qualicum Beach? And how often do we look at this EWR plan?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So-
Sorry if you already covered this in the slides.
Yeah, no
Apologies.
problem. It's very confusing. So the city of Parksville's responsibility for emergency management comes from the emergency, and now it's called the Emergency Disaster Management Act. And so basically, when that gives the city the authority to declare an emergency, actually the mayor is usually the one that does that. The province can also declare an emergency. And so it's really to deal with a host of different scenarios where there's a threat to human life and or property. And so basically when that happens, well, actually, we haven't really done that too much since you've been on council, but we declare an emergency, we activate usually an EOC, we call it. And there's going to be some training for you guys coming up with Qualicum Beach. And so we do things jointly when it makes sense, but if it's just a Parksville emergency, we can activate an EOC just for Parksville, or we can activate it for the region through EMO. So I guess it depends on the type of emergency, but necessity usually dictates that we work together as a region. So we have a formal partnership with the town of Qualicum Beach, and it's an informal partnership with the RDN at the current moment. They did not yet formally sign into the agreement that we're in. And we have the formal agreement because we own resources collectively. So the trailers that we have for emergency communications, for pet movement, all the supplies we have for group lodgings are owned jointly by EMO, which is currently us and Qualicum Beach. And we also share storage costs, and we have an office here for the volunteers, and we share that position. So I would say 99% of the time we're operating as EMO, but there might be one or two events that are just Parksville specific, and then Kate would actually lead that. But we do also share staff. So we can't run an EOC very long with just our own staff. So in the past, we've had shared, like the directors are usually the CAOs. And so the 3 CAOs have sort of taken turns and gone to when the regional power outage happened around Christmas that time. So yes, we basically work together unless there's a reason why it doesn't affect the other partners.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So now I'll go to more like extreme weather, not extreme weather, but say the heat wave that we have, or the needing for warming centers. Typically what we hear from Qualicum Beach is, well, Parksville has those facilities, so we don't need to have those in Qualicum Beach. And if we are working regionally, is there a possibility of using RDN Transit somehow to, use the facilities over in Qualicum Beach sometimes, whether it's a cooling center or a warming center overnight or something? Again, it's a regional problem, and I think more regions work together. And if it's about unhoused folks not having the ability to move, to transport themselves, like perhaps RDN can help provide transit. Have we looked at that option?
Yeah, actually, if I may, through the mayor, thank you for that question. We exactly did that in the last cold event. So the regional district transit folks cooperated with us. We were actually on the phone, myself, the mayor, and I don't know who else was on the phone that day. I was actually in Victoria in a gym and had to stand outside in -8 because I didn't have service. So I remember it vividly. But we had very good cooperation from the regional district. They put on extra bus frequency, so they increased the options for folks to travel, and they also provide free transit during those events. So it's good to publicize that. They have bus passes they will hand out through the social service agencies, but if someone doesn't have that, they can just say they're going to a warming or cooling center and they do not have to pay on our transit buses. So that has been quite helpful in the last little while. And just to clarify, the town of Qualicum Beach did host the emergency warming center last season when the weather was really cold. And they also, similar to we do, they open their city hall for extended hours and provide some supplies. But yeah, that's so similar to what we do. And I believe RDN does that at the Oceanside place as well.
Councillor Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to our CAO, thank you very much for the presentation. Lots to learn there and chew on and clarify as the province in particular works through a variety of new programming to try to address some real needs in the province. And it's important to underline that 2022 was when that ministry first kind of got things going, and we're pretty early stages here of some new programs. And my question is around the communication of this presentation you just provided here. Is this something that will also be provided or presented at the task force meeting or to social service organizations as well? Because I think there might be some just general misunderstandings around responsibilities and how best to navigate the various acronyms and everything that are associated with trying to provide services.
Yeah, thank you, if I may, through the mayor. So I've personally met with the two, I believe they're both co-chairs of the Oceanside Task Force. Myself and the mayor met with them in April, and I keep in pretty regular contact with them. And we also, the CAOs from the regional district, town of Qualicum, and myself have met at least monthly on this since last October. And we've met with BC Housing twice in person and once on the call just recently, and they're going to be sending us some information additional for the cold weather response. And that information is really going to be what services are provided by who and funded by the province. So we're anxiously awaiting that, just for factual information to share with council. So we do our best to share the information that we have. BC Housing, I believe, also does those kinds of presentations with their providers. So they have, as I mentioned, this call for people to bid. And they have something, they used an acronym that I couldn't remember, but it's basically your portfolio manager, I guess. So like, for example, Island Crisis Care would work with an individual at BC Housing who approves all of their programs in Nanaimo, in Parksville, wherever they are. And they have a person that's their like portfolio manager. So I assume that they're doing that, but I do think that we had to clarify a lot of the recent emergency management role, because before that happened, we couldn't claim. It was actually expressly excluded as an emergency that was fundable or eligible for funding. So extreme weather we couldn't get a task number. So that's very new. That's really only about 18 months that we can access that money. So that's positive. But then of course there is extra process around that. So we've had to learn how that works. But what we're finding is working really well is coordinating in advance to know what the service providers might need, and then calling through our contacts at the province to say, is this eligible? Like, where's the pitfalls? Like, strangely, if you open an emergency shelter, the like bedding and cots and things are not covered. So you have to find some other way to fund that. So knowing that in advance is really helpful. And just being able to sort of plan for where the money is coming from. And then sometimes it's covered through your extreme weather plan, which we do not have one of those right now in the province or in the city. Our social service providers are working towards one. So that's what I mentioned. We hope to see in the fall. And we have a meeting planned early September with the regional CAOs and the chairs of the Oceanside Task Force to see where and how we can fit into that. Because we don't have one right now, so.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to our CAO for the presentation. I think everyone around this table cares about people who are less privileged and less fortunate than we are. We haven't turned down any non-market housing that's been presented to us at this council. In my mind, if we just approved 233 long-term rental units. And to me, that alleviates a lot of pressure on people who can't afford the down payment on a home of, say, $55,000 for our median home price of, say, $800,000 here in Parksville. So would turning that down, that 233 long-term rental units, does that add or take away from more pressure on people trying to find a home, whether it's non-market or market rental?
Sorry. You do not have the floor.
Thanks.
You repeat your question if you would, Councillor Wood, because it was interrupted, please. Just the last part.
In my mind, since council just approved 233, the majority of council just approved 233 long-term rental units here in Parksville. Does that add to or kind of alleviate some of the pressure we see on housing prices in the area, as we all want people to have a home, and we're talking about non-market housing? So does that market rental housing that the majority of council just approved, does that add to the pressure or kind of alleviate the pressure that we're trying to provide through non-market housing?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I got to give that to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's not a rhetorical question. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. I would say that so speaking corporately as the city of Parksville, our official community plan has specific policy around creating a wide range of housing options. And so for the last 10 years, that plan has been in place, and there was something similar in the previous plan. That Parksville, I think, as a city, wants to strive to support people at all stages of life. So we want to have affordable housing for a new couple or a newly graduated person or a new tradesperson. And we want them to stay in our community and move through those stereotypical stages of life. And so having housing that is like carriage houses, suites, we allow suites on our commercial properties also. We have small lot residential, we have apartments, condos, different heights in different areas. I think our planning department has done an excellent job of trying to meet that policy objective and having diverse housing for anyone, whether you want to spend your money on something other than housing and travel and you have loads of money, but you still want to have that option, or whether you're someone that is struggling and just cannot afford, an older, massive lot on Temple that's going to be $1 million for the house that you have there. So I think when councils are looking at development permits and looking at rezonings, they have historically been informed by that objective. And we've certainly seen in the years that I've been here a real shift or change away from that single family kind of bigger lot like Church and Wren's. We really haven't approved a subdivision like that in over a decade. So we're seeing mostly multifamily coming through. So, to answer your question, I think all new housing that we bring to our community alleviates pressure somewhere in that system. And so if you think about even a market rental, somebody who's perhaps further along the spectrum could move into that market rental and free up the more affordable rental at the end of where they were. So we really just want to have that kind of, it's almost like a conveyor belt of housing. Like you start at one end, you move your way through, and you end at probably where you started, right? So a townhouse or an apartment is an option for a lot of folks who are kind of wanting to downsize. I think someone mentioned talking to someone in the community about that. So yeah, I guess that answers the question the best I can.
Yeah. And just follow up with that, it's a good question, Councillor Wood. Are they reliant on each other? Yes, they are. And it's been what planning department has taught me over the few years is that we need balanced housing. We need balanced types of all housing. You can't have too much market housing and you can't have too much affordable housing, because if it gets out of balance, one has to pay for the other. In the case of today, where we talked about Resort Drive, they're paying the full hook for property taxes. There's no exemptions, there's no DCC relaxations there, market housing. But at the same time, on the other ones that we're planning on putting through for the Lions Association, it's going to be workforce housing that's going to be affordable. That involved a contribution from the city of Parksville, a land that had value. It was taxpayer paid for land. And so you can't have too much of that as well as you can't ask a developer to actually give us, affordable housing or non-market housing without having incentives in place to offer the developer, because the developer simply won't do it. You heard today, it's just a kind of a rough explanation as to why apartment rental housing is necessary. And why was 6 stories necessary? Because that's where they can begin to break even with the cost of land and construction costs. That's where it is. They're not making huge profits here. They're providing rental housing, but at the same time, they need that density because they've already paid for the land and so forth. And so if they can go up to 6 stories, it's going to make it more achievable to have that one aspect of housing that is important to the whole picture. So yeah, they're all dependent on each other, and right down to our planning departments being so progressive and allowing for basement suites and carriage houses in our community, way before anybody else is doing it. Our planning department did that, which was giving us long-term rental, but affordable as well, because they're in a basement suite in somebody's place. And yet the suites that they're in were all inspected by our building department. And so they were not only affordable, but they were also safe and convenient housing units. So yeah, it all really is connected to the whole thing, as long as we have to keep it in balance. And I have to say that, once again, our planning department just educated myself anyways to saying, just keep it all going like this, but just recognize what this is going to cost you. If there's, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? But in this case, we're working together, and Parksville is doing it, I believe, better than anybody on Vancouver Island. And so I'm very happy about that. And with our CAO's presentation today, it just shows that Parksville is very ahead of this curve. And we're punching way above our weight. So I'm pleased with that. So any other first-time speakers? Yes. Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Well, I didn't realize we were still talking about the previous item on the agenda about the rental units being built. But I want to thank the staff through the CAO for the emergency management plan that you've executed, and especially with the last heat wave that we've had. This is just a few comments to thank you, through you to Kate and all our staff that's been involved. It was a job well done. Again, we didn't really hear any complaints coming to the council on this, which is a good thing. So really appreciate your work on that. Thank you.
Councillor Grimes.
Thank you. And just a follow-up from my original question that I forgot to bring up at the time, or get my hand in there quickly enough. I wonder if on this list of contributions, if it includes the fact that the city is foregoing taxation as well in situations where there's no permissive tax exemption, that BC Assessment assesses some properties in the community as being outside of the assessable at all range, which means that there's no property tax collected on those properties, which then means that the amount that property would have collected now is being paid by everybody else in the community. And that's where I think it's important to celebrate that and make sure that's kept in balance, as the mayor was talking about, because we are asking people within the boundaries of the city of Parksville to pay a little more in order to provide supports within the community that do actually benefit the broader region, not just Parksville, which is something I think it's important to communicate in order to, and celebrate and recognize the work that's being done here. And again, I think there's a lot of discussion in the community around how best to deal with the challenge of housing and homelessness. And we all want to do our part to the best of our ability within our role. And to define those roles is key so that we can really focus on doing a good job at what our role is in the equation. Because when everyone's doing a good job at their role, then that's when we can actually get towards hopefully addressing these problems.
Great. No further questions for our CAO at this time? Okay, I guess, I don't know if I called him for a mover or a seconder for the recommendations yet. Could I have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Grenz? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. So, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I am now going to go back to our absent delegation report. I'll do one more call. Is Mr. Tarnowski in the audience? Nobody's appeared online. Thank you. Okay, so this report is regarding from the Manager of Administration Services for the business license application for an Oceanside rental for council consideration of a business license application for Oceanside rentals. Do I have a mover seconder for the recommendations? But what I want to do is I want to do 1 and 2 separate. 1 and 2, yeah. Do you want to separate everyone? Go. Oh, do you want to do the whole thing? Oh, okay. If everyone else is comfortable doing all of, anyone else? Well, sorry, I'll go with that, Councillor Fraz. Got to have a mover and a seconder to take all of the recommendations.
But I just got to clarify which one, because there's a choice in there. So
Oh, I see. Yes.
I was going to move 1, 2, 3, and 4. The second portion, that council uphold the license inspector decision.
Yes, you're rephrasing the motion itself. Yeah.
Just clarifying. 'cause
Yes,
it's
yeah,
and
I
or
know.
in there, yeah.
Yeah, it's presented as 3 and 4 instead of and or, right? Did everyone get what Councillor Fraz is moving there?
It's 4, and then number 4 has 2 options. So the second portion of number 4.
Right. Okay, seconded by Councillor Wood. Discussion. You want to say anything further?
I think I'll just add the reason why I'm going with that. I think the city's done their due diligence on it and respecting the bylaws as everyone plays by the same rules. And yeah, I think it's the right move to do it. If they, they had an opportunity to come here today too, and unfortunately they didn't, so I can't support their request.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Gore?
Everything that Councillor Frost just said. Just to add again, yeah, it will set a precedent as well. I think respecting the city's regulations and the fact that the individual has been operating without a license, had an opportunity to come speak to council. They haven't shown, so I will be supporting the motion by Councillor Frost.
Thank you. Councillor Beal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I would like to add that it is unfortunate that this individual did not come forward today. I wonder why. I was curious to know from the bit of information that we have here if there's actually a kitchen in this suite upstairs, stairs, quotation marks, but it seems like the bylaw has done their due diligence and we haven't heard anything else from the individual. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely will be supporting what our bylaw compliance officers have decided to, that action they've decided to take on this, and I'll be supporting this as well. All those in favor? Oh, sure, sure. Just hold off the question. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just quickly ask staff, how long has this been operating without a license?
Since February.
So the answer, the microphone does always work since February of this year.
A question to you, staff again. So It's close to 6 months. They've been operating without a license. Is there a reason why no tickets were issued?
I'm not sure about the ticket situation, but if I may, through the mayor, usually we work with folks to try and get compliance rather than do the enforcement. It's often a last resort when we have to issue a ticket or have to come to council. And so I don't know I'm not the bylaw manager anymore, so I don't know the answer to that one, but just generally speaking, folks, I think, have a couple of different options. They can apply to change the zoning, they can comply right away, or they can appeal to council when the business license was turned down. And so I guess, speaking from when I was the manager of bylaw, we don't usually like to double ding people, I suppose, so to speak. So probably the next option would be a ticket if they still continue to refuse, but that's just generally speaking.
I do appreciate I think the steps that staff has taken to get them into compliance rather than enforcing. I think that's the right approach. And it's like Councillor Beal mentioned, I would love to hear from the individual what their situation is and perhaps have a different take on this, but at this time, yeah, I'll have to support the motion.
Yes, and in my past experience has always been to try and bring it into compliance is usually the best option at this point, but we also had to at least offer the opportunity for the council, for the member to present before council too, which, could allow for the 5-month delay before he actually gets to this stage here. So I believe we've done our due diligence, and I believe I'll call the question again. Is that okay? No further questions? All those in favor? Unanimous, carries. Thank you. So there, we're going to jump back to where we left off. We're going to go to number 4 for bylaws. We'd like to do 3 readings for the downtown business improvement area establishment bylaw 2024, number 1592. Do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We have one notice of motion on the agenda, and I'll just let Councillor Beal address this notice of motion right now. If you would, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I have a notice of motion. It's related to BC Culture Days event, a couple of specific events within that. And so I hope that people recall that BC Culture Days, by the way, is part of a national event. It's not just in BC, and it's spread over 3 weeks from the end of September right through into the middle of October. And as you already know, Parksville is the chosen lead city for BC Culture Days this year, which is quite an honor. There are numerous community events planned, all of which are free or by donation. They must be that way. They're interactive. People come from the community and take part in creating these works and these events, whatever they are, and they're for all ages. So our council has contributed to sponsor the opening celebration and kickoff event. And as I said, all the events are interactive. They bring people together to create lasting pieces and memorable experiences. Of those, a graffiti art inspired mural and a scrap metal sculpture of a great blue heron are 2 pieces that will be created under the guidance of artists and include community residents as part of the process. They will become permanent pieces to be put on display for the enjoyment of the public and the enhancement of the downtown area. Sites for installation are not finalized, and there will be costs for the installations. Total costs for the installation of the mural pieces and the metal sculpture, so combined, range from, hold on to your hat, $15,000 to $25,000, depending on a number of different factors, many of which are as yet unknown. So it's really quite hard to say. Some of that depends on what is the site, what's required, how big is the heron, how heavy is the heron, and so on. So it's a bit unknown at this point. I will be bringing forth a motion to ask council to consider matching donations up to a maximum amount of money, for perhaps in the range of 7,500. I'm just thinking that would be half of the lowest end of the, but we haven't got there yet. There's still more information to gather. But I will bring forth a motion to ask council to assist with the installation of 2 art pieces by contributing something, but again, as a matching. So depending what the community comes up with. And also to ask staff to work with the artistic lead on determining the sites and other necessary details for successful installation. And to identify the best source of funding, where would this money come from? However much or little it is. I don't think it won't be as much as a water study, but nonetheless. And if you have any questions about any of this between now and our meeting in September, please reach out. And if I don't have the answer, I will try and get it for you. And you could also visit BC Culture Days online to see some of the events that are planned both locally and provincially. And in fact, Parksville comes up first. There are many events. These are not the only pieces that will be created as part of the whole festival. I'll call it a festival. And I will add that the lead art.
I was gonna say.
No, one more.
Okay,
Sorry.
I was gonna say, is this gonna take part of your liaison report as well?
Oh, no.
Okay, well, this
I
notice
saw
of
that.
motion, this time we're getting a little deep here.
Okay, all right. I will finally just close by saying that the lead artist is continuing to apply for grants to see what additional funds can be raised to help with this.
Thank you for that notice of motion.
All right.
Okay, you got the heads up, so people know what it's going to be about. So that's fine. Thank you. Are there any other notices of motion? Nah, let's move on to liaison reports. Councillor Martin, Parksville and Historical Society.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this town is a hopping everywhere. It seems so much is going on. Anyway, the Parksville Historical Society is continuing their music series, and the next event is July 18th and that's this week on Thursday, was David Gogo. And August 1st is with Brandon Isaac Trio. The last event, which was, I don't know, I went there, it was amazing. It was a sellout. It was just crawling with people. I couldn't believe it. Way over 200 people there. So it was excellent, well received. So I'm just saying this in future for people to go if they want to go, to bring out their outdoor chairs and enjoy supper with the food trucks. And beverages are available. The last one was Harry Manx, who I'd never heard before, and he was amazing. So they're getting some really good, really good people. The annual Railway Days, which is every year, is Sunday, August 11th from 10 to 4 p.m. And it's a fun day for all ages. And also, any more details that are wanted, everything's on the website. It's got a very good website with all the extra details. So there you go. Want my Downtown Business Association?
Sure, you're on a roll. Carry
Okay,
on.
yes, I am. It's the same thing. Like I said, this place is a hopping. Every Tuesday there's picnic at the plaza in conjunction with the Craig Street Market. And there's lots of food trucks and refreshments. On Wednesdays, starting this next week, I believe, it's called Hot Jam Cool Games. And it's on the plaza. So it's from 3 to 6 p.m. and it's local musicians. So that's kind of a fun thing. And July 25th and August 8th, there's a summer sing-along series with Sylvia Humble, another woman after my own heart, hey? Not many Sylvias around. And it's from 6:30 to 8. So this is kind of neat, right on the plaza there. So, and this is these events are family, family friendly, and the PDBA has the website full of all the details. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would like to report, first of all, on the OCAC, just to report that the new greenhouse is in place on the grounds at the Macmillan Arts Center. And in addition to numerous plants, it will house educational and artistic programming over the summer months, including their children's programming. And a reminder to all, if you haven't seen it, that Expe for the Love of Wetlands is on exhibit in July and August and worth a look. Moving on.
I was just going to comment if I could on
Oh, yeah.
your report anyways regarding the greenhouse. I was by there Friday and toured the gardens. The greenhouse is spectacular. It's a welcome addition to the neighborhood, and the amount of vegetables that are being grown on that small space is phenomenal. I'm so impressed, as well as I'm so impressed with the sculpture that is there as well. It's ethereal, if nothing else. It's inspiring. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful in this community garden atmosphere. So I'm very appreciative for this. This is an addition to our community that has come out of nowhere, and I'm very pleased to see it growing. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's
Karen.
wonderful. Yes, actually, I meant to send a photo around to everybody so that they could see what the greenhouse is looking like, though. No, absolutely spot on. So moving to the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness, I did attend a recent meeting, but as the minutes have not yet been approved, I can't provide much detail at this time. A nod to our CAO's report earlier, the city's role and emergency management Oceanside during the recent extreme heat event was noted during discussion on the topic. And yes, it was mentioned appreciation for how well it worked with the city. There is ongoing concern that no location for a cold or extreme cold weather shelter has yet been determined. And also, I want to go back to a meeting that we had here, June 17th. We had a meeting and there were some questions about Parksville Qualicum having the third highest rate of homelessness on Vancouver Island. And there was a request for more information at that time. So the information for that came from the 2023 report on homeless counts in BC. The table showing the proportion of homelessness per 1,000 population for all the communities taking part in a homeless count is found on page 22 of the report within the summary of provincial findings. So I've just provided a copy of those pertinent pages for council, but the full report can be found online, and that is 2023 report on homeless counts in BC. Should get one to that report. So on that, the last page of the handout that I prepared, I copied for everyone. You can see all the communities that took part, and then just looking at Vancouver Island, which I think there might be 7 listed. Maybe it's just 5 or 7. Then you can look on the far right column. It's enumerated homelessness per 1,000 population. But I did want to include a bit of the summary because it does explain how it's come to that, how it does that calculation. And of course, again, the full report is available online. So I hope that's helpful. I know people were curious about that.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Any other liaison reports? Councillor Gord, did you want to do anything on Beach Fest? No. Councillor Press.
Just wanted to point out on this point here, is it was Parksville was number 3 on the island for homelessness. Was that the per thousand? Was that the point per capita? Out of 5 on the list for the island? Okay. I just thought the perspective of it was important as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fratt. If I may, through to Councillor
ahead.
Fratz, I don't recall right now if you were at that meeting, but it was, what came up was that it was 3rd after Campbell, Port Alberni, Campbell River, and then Parksville. And the comment was made at the non-market task force meeting that just that people who were even in social services were surprised that it was greater than Nanaimo and some other communities on the island. So that was the context in which it was presented.
I guess the reason why I pointed out though is just because when we first heard that without seeing the list, saying the third highest made it sound high, but it also could be the third lowest if you look at it from the other way. So just that context in there, right?
Okay,
I think that was the context I presented, that it
anyways,
was
yeah.
after those other communities and that it was more than a couple of others, which surprised people. That was all.
yeah, I was surprised at the original comment, so it just puts it more in perspective as where we stand. That's great, thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay, moving on. We're moving now to our special business council. Do I move or second for the recommendation that pursuant to section 90 E, F, and K of the community charter, the council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to the acquisition, disposition, and expropriation of land or improvements, law enforcement and negotiations, and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service. I will move or seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Wood. All those in favor? Thank you. Carries unanimous. We'll go into in camera now. 3:36 council. Let's take a quick break, stretch your legs. We'll convene at 3:45.